He wasn't breaking the law, he wasn't even causing a scene. Just a young black man walking through his own neighborhood when a self-appointed HOA cop stepped in, gun drawn, authority imagined, and assumptions deadly. What the man with the weapon didn't know was that his target wasn't just another face to intimidate. Beneath the calm exterior stood someone trained, disciplined, and prepared for far more than a neighborhood confrontation. What happens when prejudice collides with power it never expected? Keep watching, because this moment would change everything. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. Marcus Johnson, a 28-year-old Army veteran and Special Forces operative, had returned home after years of service overseas. To his neighbors, he was simply the man who jogged every morning, carried himself with discipline, and rarely spoke about what he had endured. To Marcus, civilian life was about finding peace, mowing his lawn, helping his mother with groceries, and blending back into the rhythm of normalcy. The neighborhood looked picture-perfect: manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and an HOA board that prided itself on order. But beneath the tidy streets was an undercurrent of suspicion, a place where a young black man, even in his own home, was often treated as if he didn't belong. Marcus had felt the stares before, the cautious glances when he walked past certain houses, but he brushed them off. After everything he had survived, petty judgment seemed small. That night he was heading home after a late workout, sweat on his brow, gym bag slung over his shoulder. The air was cool, the streets unusually quiet. But as Marcus turned onto his block, he noticed something different: a man standing rigid near a parked SUV, watching him too closely. The glare wasn't casual, it was assessing, challenging. Marcus had seen looks like that before overseas, where danger often hid behind a single stare. What Marcus didn't know was that this man wasn't just watching. He was waiting, convinced that his authority extended far beyond his title as a self-proclaimed neighborhood protector. And before the night was over, he would push Marcus into a confrontation that would expose far more than prejudice. Marcus walked steadily, his gym bag swinging lightly against his side, but the man near the SUV wasn't moving aside. He squared his shoulders, his hand resting near his hip, as if daring Marcus to come closer. The fluorescent glare of the streetlight caught the edge of a metal badge clipped to his belt, though it didn't look like any real law enforcement badge Marcus had ever seen. The man barked, "You don't belong here." His tone wasn't casual, it was sharp, accusatory, and dripping with authority he didn't truly have. Marcus froze for just a moment, not out of fear, but disbelief. He lived here. This was his neighborhood, his street, his home just a few doors down. Yet somehow, in this man's eyes, none of that mattered. The so-called HOA cop took a step closer, his hand shifting, brushing against the outline of a pistol holstered at his side. Marcus's instincts sharpened instantly. Years of training had taught him how to read danger before it exploded, and right now, every movement screamed escalation. Marcus raised his voice, steady but firm. "I live here." But the words fell flat, swallowed by suspicion. The man sneered, eyes narrowing, as if the very claim was an insult. "Prove it," he snapped, his fingers tightening near the weapon. The silence that followed was heavy, stretching longer than it should. Marcus could feel the neighborhood itself watching, curtains shifting, lights flickering on, silent spectators waiting to see how the scene would unfold. Then came the sound that shattered the air, the unmistakable click of a firearm being drawn. Marcus's pulse surged. The barrel of a handgun now pointed directly at him, the man's voice trembling but vicious. "Hands where I can see them." In that moment, the weight of everything pressed down on Marcus, not just the threat of a bullet, but the bitter truth of why it was happening. He wasn't seen as a neighbor, a homeowner, or a veteran who had risked his life for this country. He was being reduced to nothing more than his skin color, judged guilty before a word could be spoken. Marcus stayed calm, his muscles taut, his eyes locked on the gun. Inside, a storm raged. He could disarm this man in seconds if he wanted to. He had trained for situations far deadlier than this. But here, on an American street he called home, he was forced to stand still, to weigh every breath, every twitch, knowing that the wrong move could mean headlines instead of justice. The man's voice grew louder, cracking with nerves. "I said don't move." Spit flew with the command, his hand shaking against the trigger. Marcus's jaw clenched, his body locked between restraint and survival. The air thickened, each second stretching like an eternity. And then another sound cut through the tension. Tires screeched as a car turned onto the street, headlights sweeping across them. The gun wavered, but the man didn't lower it. Marcus's heart pounded harder. The situation was spiraling, and with every tick of the clock, the chances of walking away unharmed slipped further from his grasp. The night wasn't over, and neither was the danger. The gun didn't waver. Its cold black barrel glared under the streetlight, locked on Marcus's chest like a sentence waiting to be carried out. The man's face twisted with a mix of rage and fear, sweat glistening along his temple. His finger trembled on the trigger. Marcus had seen this moment before, just not here, not like this. In combat zones thousands of miles away, this was the split second that determined life or death. But here, on his own street, in front of his own home, it carried a cruelty far heavier. His body tensed, instincts screaming to move, to disarm, to neutralize the threat. He could do it in less than 3 seconds, pivot, strike, control the weapon. He had rehearsed it endlessly, drilled into muscle memory during his years in special forces. But one thought held him frozen. If he moved, he would be another story, another name scrolling across headlines. A black man lunging, a black man threatening, a black man shot dead in his own neighborhood. The man's voice cracked, rising louder, harsher. "Get on the ground!" It wasn't authority anymore, it was desperation. Marcus stood still, refusing to crumble under false power. His silence only seemed to enrage the man further. He stepped closer, the barrel now a breath away from Marcus's chest, his finger twitching dangerously. And then came the voices. Doors opened, neighbors emerged, drawn by the shouting and the sight of a gun raised under the suburban glow of porch lights. Some whispered, others pulled out their phones. The scene transformed instantly from a standoff into a stage. Every camera lens, every whispering neighbor carried the weight of witness. The man barked again, on the ground now. His words shook, no longer commands but pleas for control slipping through his fingers. Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. He looked past the gun, straight into the man's eyes, with a calm that unsettled. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival laced with unshakable training. And then, in one chilling moment, the man made his fatal mistake. He shoved the barrel forward, pressing it against Marcus's chest as though to force submission. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A single twitch, a single panic-induced squeeze of the trigger, and it would all be over. But Marcus finally spoke, steady, unwavering, his voice carrying the weight of both warning and revelation. "You don't know who you're pointing that at." The words sliced through the night, not shouted, but delivered with a gravity that hung heavy in the humid air. The man blinked, confused, his grip faltering just slightly. And that's when it hit, the realization in the crowd, the murmurs spreading. Someone whispered loud enough for others to hear, "He's military. Special forces." The tide shifted, but the gun didn't drop. The tension was unbearable, the line between life and death razor thin. Marcus stood unbroken, the man's trembling weapon pressed against his chest, the cameras rolling, the world watching. And in that terrifying stillness, one truth became painfully clear. Marcus's survival no longer rested in his own hands. It rested in the split-second decision of a frightened man clinging to false power. Would this be the moment Marcus's story ended with a gunshot? Or the moment a neighborhood finally saw the truth of what prejudice really looked like? The standoff finally broke, not with a gunshot, but with the weight of witnesses. The cameras stayed fixed, neighbors' voices rose, and the man's trembling hands betrayed the power he thought he held. Slowly, under the eyes of dozens, his arm lowered, the barrel slipping away from Marcus's chest. The moment could have ended in silence, but the echo of what almost happened lingered heavier than any bullet. Marcus stood tall, unbroken on the outside, but inside a storm churned. He had survived wars overseas, yet here in his own neighborhood, in front of his own home, his life had hung on the fragile thread of someone else's prejudice. The uniform he once wore, the sacrifices he had made for his country, none of it shielded him from the suspicion tied to the color of his skin. The man was escorted away, but not in handcuffs. And that was the bitter truth. Marcus had de-escalated, the community had witnessed, yet justice still hesitated. For many, it was just another incident. For Marcus, it was a reminder that no amount of discipline, training, or honor could erase the target placed on him the moment he was seen as just another black man in America. That night, as he sat in silence, the images replayed in his mind, the trembling barrel pressed against his chest, the fear disguised as authority, the realization that survival wasn't just about combat skills, it was about luck, timing, and restraint that shouldn't have been demanded of him in the first place. Marcus's story isn't just his own. It's a reflection of countless others, those whose names we know and those we never will. Each encounter, each close call is a reminder of a system that still struggles to see humanity before stereotype. And so, the question remains, how many more near tragedies must unfold? How many more lives must balance on the edge of fear and bias before justice truly becomes equal for all?